version of Gama. So you can see it's a very basic version of Gama without any editor of code where you have to you had to program your model using XML and with the basic visualization, basic integration of JS data and so on. So since then, Gama has evolved a lot with many features, managing advanced display with a new modeling language, with a new editor to define your models and so on. So, and with this evolution, we have seen a growth in terms of for many things in Gama. And first of all, of users. At the beginning, it was an internal project with just 3 or 5 users. And now we have many users from all around the world. So it was important for us to organize an event to be able to gather at the same time modelers and developers of the platform, to be able to exchange about the Gama platform, about there is a use made with the Gama platform, about the needs from the modelers about the Gama platform, about also to create a community about different subjects, to let people be able to exchange on a specific subject among the users of the Gama platform. Okay. And so for that for us, it was very interesting to see that many people registered for this conference. So for that, you are not so many, but it's supposed during the 3 days to have a lot more people that will follow the conferences, because we have more than 150 participants registered from 27 countries. So, and with very different profile of modelers and users of the Gama platform. So for us, it was very interesting to see, to be able to meet all of you. During the 3 days, we will have 67 presentations dealing with very different topics. For instance, the definition of new features for the Gama platform, new method or techniques for model exploration or calibrations, the use of Gama in participatory modeling and simulation processes, and the use of Gama for different topics such as ecology and agriculture, social dynamics, urban dynamics, transportation and mobility, risk management, and COVID-19. So yeah, I think it's a good place here to be able to have an overview of what is done currently with the Gama platform, to discuss about the evolution of the platform as well. And it's for that we have the chance to have today a keynote presentation by Alexis Lorgoul. So Alexis Lorgoul is a senior researcher at IND. He is the initiator and the coordinator of the development of the Gama platform. So he's going to give his point of view on the past and future of the Gama platform during a talk. So it will be today from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. So if you want to learn more about the Gama platform, about his vision of the evolution of the Gama platform, I think it will be very interesting to be here at this talk. In addition to that, we wanted during this conference to be able to broaden the discussion, not only to focus on the Gama platform, but to also to have discussion about more global topics. It's for that we have decided to organize 2 roundtables. So the first one will be tomorrow, and it will be so at the same hour as the kids talk of Alexis, so from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. And we wanted to discuss about another very important topic, that is the trust that we can have in models. Indeed, with COVID-19, we saw that many models were used for decision making, and there's a debate about if we can trust or not these models. So to speak about this subject, we will have Bruce Edmonds from the Manchester University, Pablo Jensen from ENS Lyon, and Pascal Perez from the Rouen University. In addition to this first roundtable, on Friday we will have a second one at the same hour. this one focuses on more on the usage and challenges on agent-based modeling and simulations. So the idea here is to make a statement about the current use of agent-based modeling, the place of agent-based modeling or other approaches, if it's now a classical approach used to study complex system or not, the limitation and the challenges concerning agent-based simulations. And to speak about that, we will have Andrew Crooks from the Frugivore University, Arnaud Grignard from the University and the MIT, and Franziska Krüger from the Örebro University. So it's all about the program. I just wanted to say something about the organization of the GamaDays. So you saw that we have many sessions, and in each session we will have between 3 and 5 presentations followed by a discussion. So it's a 10-minute presentation or 20-minute presentation. So the goal during the discussion will be to exchange about the different works that was presented. And if you want to ask questions about the talk, you have 2 solutions. If you want to ask a question that will be answered during the discussion session, you can write your question on the Zoom chat. If it's more questions or very specific technical points for one of the presentation or more global questions, you can write them on the conference Slack. Normally you receive information to connect to this Slack workspace that is dedicated to GamaDays. Here you have the link, but I think you already have it. And so it will be it's the end of my short talk, introductive talk. Just to say again, thank you very much for being here and for following this the GamaDays, and I hope that we will enjoy it and find very interesting talks. And so I will give the floor to Alexis, I think who is the chairman of the first session.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? It's okay. So I'm very happy to be the first chairman of the session, and actually it's a session which will have 5 papers, all dedicated to ecology and agriculture. And we will begin actually by a presentation by Hugo Thierry about frugivore identity and landscape configuration, how they affect seed rain during restoration. So Hugo, are you okay? And can you share your slides?
Let's just say, can everyone see that? Perfect.
Yeah, that's perfect. So you have 20 minutes, okay, to make your presentation. Try to stay on time because we are already a little bit late. And sure. For all the others, I just repeat what Patrick said. If you have questions, ask them in the chat or on Slack. Raise your hand maybe, and the question will be asked at the end of the session, not at the end of the talk. Okay, so keep them if you want to ask questions. Thanks a lot. So Hugo, it's well up to you. Okay, I give you the floor.
Well, thank you. Excuse me in advance. It's 3 a.m. here in Canada, so I might be a little bit tired, but I'll try to go through with this. So today I'll be talking about basically a model that studies the interactions between the behavior of animals that eat fruits and landscape structure in terms of where seeds land in a landscape to inform restoration projects. And this is something I've done during my previous PhD postdoc, at Iowa State University. So just a quick context. So seed dispersal is very important for plant species. For example, in tropical systems, there's over 80% of the woody plant species that need seed dispersal to be able to do their life cycle. And It has some advantages, and mainly it allows to maintain genetic diversity and species richness. So it gives a healthy environment to the forest. And it also allows to recover from anthropogenic disturbances. So for example, trees that fall, there's a tree gap, and usually there's a species that's going to come in and take over and grow there. And if seeds are not being moved into those tree gaps, there's going to be a lot of problems for the species to colonize those gaps. And we know that behavior is going to be something really important. Where birds move in the landscape is going to drive where seeds are actually going to land. And there's a lot of drivers of behavior. For example, just basically movement. So how far a bird moves, where it moves to is going to be important. There's also sociability. So maybe they'll move towards other birds from the same species, or there's influences from other individuals. There's also gut passage, which is really important for seed dispersal. That means like some seeds, to be able to germinate, they need to be eaten by an animal that's going to pre-digest it, and then it's going to be able to germinate. And different species have different gut passage times. And then there's also habitat preferences, right? Like where the bird wants to move or where it spends most of its lifetime is also going to matter on guiding how it's going to move in the landscape. And we can deduct from that landscape structure. So basically the configuration and the composition of a landscape. So how much of each habitat is in it and how it is placed depending on other habitats. It's going to be very important to inform where birds are going to move. And basically we try to develop a model that could comprehend the interactions between the behavior of animals and the landscape structure to try and inform restoration projects. So just a quick detail on my case study. So I had the chance to work on Guam. So Guam is a small island in the Pacific, and it's actually a US territory. It's that red little box there. And Guam has a problem since the 1940s, is this guy. So this is an invasive brown tree snake that was accidentally introduced to the island in the late 40s. And the problem is the consequences of the introduction of that snake was that it basically killed almost all bird species from the island. So out of, I think, the 18 bird species that used to live on the island, we can only find 3 now. And those species are not living in the forest anymore. And that has big problems because the birds were the main seed dispersers of native species in the forest. So now that they're not present in the forest anymore, the fruits are not being eaten by anyone and the seeds are not being moved in the landscape. And this is leading to degradation of the native forest. And there's other problems like invasive plant species that have come into the landscape that do not need to be dispersed by animals that are just taking over these forests. So there's a huge need locally to restore seed dispersal by trying to bring back the birds into the forest. So this is also going to be partnered with trying to get rid of the snake, but I won't be talking about this. There's a few different departments that are working on that, and I'm going to try to focus, if we get rid of the snake, how can we reintroduce animals to maximize seed dispersal and maintain the structure of the forest? So luckily enough, we have 2 species that are good candidates to be able to restore seed dispersal. The first one is the Micronesian starling. It's the black bird on the left. And this one, luckily enough, is still present on the island. And a funny thing is that it used to live in the forest. And when the snake colonized the island, there's a few populations that were able to survive by moving into urban areas and starting to nest in urban areas where the snakes are basically absent. It's a good seed disperser because it eats most of the tree species present on Guam, and it has a big home range and it does a lot of long distance dispersal. And then we have this little guy on the right, which is the Mariana fruit dove, which is not on the island anymore, but luckily enough, it's still present in other islands of the Mariana Islands. So we could like take populations there and move them back to Guam. And this one is a little bit particular because it's mostly a native forest specialist, so it doesn't move a lot between habitats, but it's also consuming a lot of different species. So there's a bunch of collaborators that did a lot of studies to look at the behavior of these 2 animals. So they looked at tracking data using GPS. They did visual observations to see what fruits they were eating, and they did also feeding trials to see how long the seeds would take to move through their gut. And this is sort of the comparison table, just summarize a little bit what I said. They both eat a lot of species, which is very good when you want to reintroduce seed dispersal. And the Sali has a much bigger home range than Toto and likes to cross ecotones a lot. That's just a fancy term to say it moves between habitats a lot more than the one on the right. So we wanted to test some landscape structures. So we came up with 7 theoretical landscapes. So basically, you have intact habitat, which is like good forest, which is the dark green. You have bad habitat, which is the degraded habitat, which is light green. And then just to simulate the fact that the snake is still present on the island, we have this middle area, which is a refuge area where we hypothesize that the snake is not there anymore. So basically the birds will always come back to that black area to nest at night to not be eaten. And we tested several like just simple kind of configurations. There's like big patches with the 2 border ones that you see on the top left. There's corridors, which is something that's used a lot in restoration ecology, putting corridors between like good habitats. Then we have the 2 even scenarios that are just trying to maximize spatial heterogeneity. So something that looks like a lot like a checkerboard. And then just for control, we added in a random one where we assigned patches randomly. And what's important to note is across this, only configuration changes, the composition stays the same, which means there's always the same number of patches for intact, there's always the same number of patches for degraded and for refuge. We really wanted just to test. It doesn't matter how much of each, it matters how they're placed. So what we did is build the estimating seed animal landscape interactions model that we called eSali. And what we did in that, so it's in Gama, and we basically simulated the behavior of these species based on the data we had. So they have, we know how far they move, how frequently they move, what chances are they to move into a specific habitat based on all the data we have. And what we did is simulate 30 individuals of the Sali, 30 individuals of the Toto, and we threw them into landscapes and simulated for a year at a 10-minute time step. And what they do in the landscape is they move around, and at every time step, they're gonna eat a seed, then hold it in their gut for X amount of time. And then once it's time to like deposit it, it gets written down into a cell, and we're able to track all the seeds, where they're moved and by who they were moved. And just a quick assumption is that when they're feeding into the intact habitat, we consider that they're eating good seeds, so native seeds. And where they're feeding in the light gray areas, the degraded habitats, we consider that they're eating bad seeds. So they're native and non-native seeds. And we set 2 restoration goals that we wanted to achieve. The first one, and these are kind of logical, we want them to move the most good seeds into bad habitats to try to like bring them back into a good state. And we want to minimize the number of bad seeds that are moved into good habitats to avoid it taking over the native species. So this is what the model looks like. So we have 30 individuals of each species, and they're gonna move around the landscape during the day based on the behavior that we modeled. And you'll see that when it hits nighttime, they're all just going to come back in the middle in one dispersal movement, which should happen soon. There we go. And then once it's daytime again, they'll just start moving back into the landscape, eating seeds and moving them around. So we get cool little results like this, where we're basically producing heat maps of where seeds are moved. So you have the 7 landscapes, the 2 species. And basically when it's red, that means there's a lot of seeds that have fallen into that cell. And when it's blue, there's very few seeds that have landed into that. So this is just a quick visualization of what the results are. But then we can make these sort of graphs where we compare how much seeds are moved between the both species and between the 7 theoretical landscapes. So when we're looking at our first goal, which is the one on the left, which is moving the least bad seeds into good areas, we see that these scenarios on the left seem to be the ones where we're achieving the best. And actually Toto is doing better than Sally in this case with like very lower movement of seeds in both these scenarios. But funny enough, there's a trade-off that is pretty clear, is that when you're looking at your second goal, which is trying to move the most good seeds into bad areas, it's actually these scenarios that are performing the best. And Sally, the one on the bottom, is actually the one really performing the best here. So there's no clear good kind of idea that comes out. Like you can't have both of your goals together. There's a clear trade-off in between the first one and the second one. So this would be some of the recommendations that we would have based on the results of the model. Is if you wanted to prioritize moving the least bad seeds into good areas, you'd probably want to reintroduce the Toto, the one on the top left, first, because it's the one that is providing that goal the best. But if you're trying to aim for the second goal, which is moving like good seeds into bad areas to restore them, you might want to pick the other seed disperser because it's outperforming the first one. But then you can start thinking about more complex kind of processes that can kick in. For example, the idea of plant competitiveness. So plant competitiveness is basically when you have two species in the same condition, one of them can perform better than the other and outcompete it no matter what. So it's going to take over even if they both land in the same spot. And once you start considering that, then maybe the recommendations could change. For example, on the top, if we're thinking that non-native seeds are better and they'll always outcompete, then maybe you'd want to introduce the Toto instead of the Sally, because the Sally is moving a lot of seeds and a lot of non-native seeds into the area. So here Toto is actually a better performer because it moves less seeds into these areas. And it's kind of the same thing with the other scenario. That means that if no matter what, your native seeds are always outcompeting your non-native seeds, and the only fact that they're not doing well is because they're not being moved, then you might want to just throw in the Sally into your landscapes because it's one that's moving a lot of seeds throughout no matter what scenario. And yeah, so this is basically just to show it's a little bit more complicated than that, but we can make like real recommendations based on the output of this model with things that we couldn't really understand just by looking at the data or things like that. So yeah, that was a little fast, but to conclude, so we clearly see that individual-based models allow to see kind of these emerging properties that might be very difficult to pinpoint when you're just looking at your data or at your ecological processes. And putting those kind of simple rules together in a complex system allows you to see these bigger picture patterns and identify some trends. In terms of animal ecology, this work kind of highlights this importance of interactions between environments and individuals and how behavior is going to be influenced on what the surrounding looks like and how it is structured. And that clearly affects seed rain here in particular, but it affects a lot of different ecological processes. And finally, this is what's really neat about this kind of study, is that you can actually come up with some ideas and directives on things to do on the ground in terms of informing decisions and management scenarios. So basically with these results, we can now go back to Guam, look at the structure of a specific landscape that is of interest to try to restore animals, and think about which ones we're going to bring in priority based on this structure and based also on data on plant competitiveness, for example. So we do come up with suggestions and recommendations based on these kinds of outputs. And yeah, that's about it. I'd be happy to answer any questions in the chat or on Slack. And yeah, thank you for listening to me.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hugo. It was really fascinating, and actually, I didn't realize, but thank you so much for either waking up very early or not going to sleep. I don't know. It's true that organizing online conferences sometimes creates strange and weird situations. And actually, what is also quite funny, maybe a coincidence, is that we will be moving very far away from where you are right now, because the next speaker will be from Philippines, but actually quite close to Guam. Okay. Thanks again. And our next speaker should be Zenith. Zenith, are you here?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, perfect. So you have 10 minutes to present your paper on an agent-based model of a sustainable forest operation. So I give you the floor, and again, for all of you, if you have questions, ask them on Slack. For long questions, if you want to ask live questions, it will be at the end of the session. Okay. Thank you, Zenith. It's up to you.
Can you see my screen, sir?
Yeah,
yes, sir.
Very good.
Good day, everyone. I'm Zenith Arnejo, and I'm to present our paper titled An Agent-Based of a Sustainable Forest Operation, a Case of a Low Mountain Dipterocarp Forest in the Philippines. So as an introduction, we are actually, I'm unstable, yeah. We're actually a group of researchers from the Philippines, composed of foresters, economists, and computer science who performed during the training workshop held in Circa Los Baños. Going back to the presentation, so here is my outline. So I'll start with the rationale. It is a fact in forest resource management that a sustainably managed forest contributes to economic growth and social development, plus other ecosystem services. During the 1950s, the Philippines actually implemented what is called selective logging system, and it aimed to provide or generate cyclic timber harvest, leave adequate number of healthy residuals in the forest, and implement timber stand inventory, assisted natural regeneration, and enrichment planting. However, due to unimplementation of different forest rules, the Philippines was actually overexploited, and it prompted a ban in 2011 on all logging activities. And sadly, this resulted to a severe shortage of local materials, which eventually led for the Philippines to be a net importer of wood. So thus, our aim is to create a model that will provide an insight in the fact that it is possible for a sustainable forest to really provide economic provisions, such that in this model, one rotation of harvest is achieved under certain assumptions of growth rates of two groups of three species, volume equations, environmental constraints, cost of harvest, and net income. In this study, we created a theoretical forest. It actually has a real terrain with actual to partial tree inventory, and it spans 1,024 hectares and encloses some roads and river features. In this theoretical forest, the elevation ranges from 20 to 520 meters above sea level, and it is generally steep, majority of land sloping to 18 to 50%. So in this theoretical forest, there's a total of 100,000 trees residing within the forest, dominated by young trees less than 20 centimeter diameter at breast height. Majority are Dipterocarps. And in this theoretical forest, we divided it into parcels, such that each parcel contains 390 individual trees. So now let's look at our model. So here is the conceptual design of our model. We actually created 5 agents. The first one is the tree agent. Basically, what a tree agent do is it just grows at each time step, and it is based on 4 attributes: the DBH, volume, basal area, and height. The next agent is parcel. For each parcel, we implemented what is called senescence, or the tree depth, such that for all the trees inside a parcel with diameter at breast height greater than 210 centimeters, it is assumed to be dead. Also, on each parcel, we computed the harvest profit, which is a component of parcel value and harvest cost, both of which are given the equation here. So basically, it is influenced by the distance, road distance, and whether there is a river on that particular parcel. The third agent is regime. So basically, this is the middleman. What it does is it assigns parcels to planters dependent on the total basal area and how many trees there is on that particular parcel. For the harvester, it is actually based on harvest profit and harvestability, which is initially set by the user in terms of the minimum allowable harvest volume per parcel. The fourth agent is the harvester. It actually just removes the trees following this rule. For all the trees inside the parcel, if it is less than 60 cm, it cannot be removed. Within 60 to 69, 50% can be removed. And if it is greater than 70, all of it can be removed, noting the fact that there is a maximum allowable harvest volume per parcel. So the last agent is the planter. So basically, it just creates new trees with these setups. This is an example of our visualization. So at the middle, we have our terrain with the trees growing. And then on the right side, we have the volume being monitored. For this visual, for the right side, so basically what we see there is the standby parcel, the green ones, volume, and then the red ones are the harvesting activity, meaning on that particular parcels, trees are removed. The yellow ones are planting activity, and the indigo ones are the protected parcels. So in our analysis, we actually focus on economics. So we saw the interplay between economics and landscape in terms of forest growth and GIS. So for the forest growth, we considered the distance of parcel to the road network and the presence of topographical features. For the GIS or the landscape, we actually was constrained with the benefits on the tree size and other characteristics of it being a diptero or not, and the cost based on average timber harvesting. In this model, we set three different setups for the total number of harvester and planter, and the control based on whatever there is being implemented or the policy, and then the replanting setup. Here is an example result that we have. So in this simulation, we are showing the total profit. There are 4 time steps. The first time step from 0 to 20 ticks, we see an average annual net income of 11.6 million harvest volume or harvest profit. And the second time step, we see the harvesting rule kicking in. That's why there is a very quite unstable to low income at an average of 7.5 million annually. On the third step, we see the assisted natural regeneration kicking in over the 100 period, providing the long-term growth in terms of harvest, which is at around 18.3 million. And for the fourth time step, we see the sustained harvesting because of the selective harvesting and ANR, providing 9.5 average income in future years. As in conclusion, our model is able to show that selective harvesting under assumption used in the Gama forest model is actually highly profitable while maintaining ecosystem services. However, there is a need for localized, site-specific, and context-specific forest management strategies, harvesting rules, and policies. Also, we can see that with this model, we were able to show that selective harvesting can be sustainable. Here we have the graph showing how many trees there is at each time step. The green ones are the new trees, the black ones are the dead trees, and the red ones are the harvested trees. We see that because of the rules on how much you can only harvest, the total of harvested trees is maintained at a specific amount. But because of the assisted natural regeneration, the forest is actually growing. Well, there is a inconsistent or unstable trend in terms of how many dead trees there is. That is because it is dependent on senescence. In this model, we can also say that the growth and yield values is dependent on real parameters. However, for the Philippine setup, there's an urgent need for the research on this to really be conducted so that we can generate realistic estimates of the forest resource. Finally, we can say that the Gama forest model is expandable. The model can assess whether a forest contains enough harvest, making investment feasible. Future extensions of the model will focus on estimation of forest biomass. So that's it. We are the Gama Forest Model Team Group 1 and merci beaucoup. Glory to God. Thank you po.
Okay, thank you very much. Perfectly on time. That's very nice and a very, very, very interesting model as well. So again, if you have questions, there are quite a lot of discussion going on in the Slack right now, and probably a lot of questions because again, we have a model which can talk to local authorities. Okay, and it's probably something we're going to talk about. So now, thanks a lot, Zenith. And now we will be changing continent again. Okay, it will be the third time, and we will change to another continent for the last talk. Changing continent to go to Africa. Okay, and then so the subject will remain forest dynamics. We have Clive Epah Mbuge in Cameroon talking about multi-agent system for spatial modeling of forest dynamics. So Clive, are you ready? Is it okay for you? Are you here? Okay, I think if anyone has any news from our speaker, I can't see him, and I don't have his coordinates to talk to him by phone. So if anyone is aware of how to reach him, we can always ask him to talk maybe after the last talk. So Clément, are you here? Okay, Clément Nicole is not here. Ah, okay, he just arrived. Okay, Clément.
Yes, I'm arrived.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes, no problem. It's just because. Yes, no problem. It's just because. Yes, no problem. It's just because.
Sorry. Okay, this is because I have the link of YouTube turned on.
No, the speaker just before you did not show up, not yet. So is it okay for you to
yes, no problem.
present right now? Okay, perfect. Okay. So then we're actually moving also to another continent. So it's perception-based maps as input data for agent-based modeling, and we're talking about Amazonia in Ecuador. So I give you the floor. You have 10 minutes to present your work.
Okay. Yes. Could you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
So I will begin. Hello, everybody. My name is Clément Nicole, and I'm currently in internship in the IRIC lab in Toulouse. As part of my internship, I'm working on a project of using perception-based maps as input data for agent-based modeling, and more specifically, this application to the colonization of the Ecuadorian Amazonia. And I'm working with Dorian Cassette, Benoît Godou, and Melissa Kali. So I'm working on a model called Pachamama that has been developed since 2016. This model is an agent-based model using the Gama platform that simulates the installation of farmers in northern Amazonian Ecuador. In particular, it simulates it in 3 parishes. So the parishes of Dayuma, Pakayaku, and Sasha that are illustrated on the right of the screen. To resume succinctly how the model is working, every cycle on simulation that represents 1 month in reality, some settlers come to Ecuador and install themselves on a plot. And for those who are already installed, they will choose an activity to do and produce something. And this fact will deforest the territory. In the first version of the model, settlers' agents are purely minimizing their distance to the city to choose their plot, and this thing don't seem realistic. So according to article on this topic, we have to use subjective data to improve the decision-making process of our agents. And with these general remarks, a question happened, that is, how to add subjective data in the cognition of agents in order to improve the way they choose their settlements. All right, okay. So to resolve this issue, we chose to use a perception-based regional mapping, also called PBRM, and I will begin by giving you a definition of this process. So PBRM is a semi-directive method that characterizes a territory by using inhabitant perceptions. It is realized in giving to inhabitants a tracing paper overlaid on a geographical map and asking them to draw what they know and the differences of the territory according to their criteria. For example, we have the result of one interview on the right bottom corner, just here, and after that all these interviews are finished, all maps are then merged to create a global map. So I will give you an example here. In practice, after one interview, we obtain a map like this one that is delimited in different areas, and for each area, different properties that depend of the attributes chosen by the interviewees. For example, the criteria could be very variable, like the access to the radio or to health centers. And then after we obtain all these maps, we could merge it to and the result is something like this. So here in pink, this is the merge of all the interview on the Ecuador region during the campaign. So I will now explain how these data are used in the model. So we done the hypothesis that first subjective farmers criteria in order to choose their plot is land quality. So our methods consist in giving a score to all plots according to PBRM-based earth quality and distance to the main city. Then this approach is compared with the result of real pedology-based simulations and simulation with no data. So the simulation of the Pachamama model is about 500 cycles. So I will expose you the different results after 480 cycles. 80 cycles that represent 40 years in real life. And I chose to show you the parish of Sasha because this is the territory the most contrasted according to our criteria. So here is the result. So in red for the three simulation, this is the plot chosen by the farmers to install their culture. I put on background on both results using data a map that is yes, I put on background a map that the darkest it is, the worse is the quality of earth. So the result for the three simulation is different, and we could constate that for the PBRM results, the plot using by the plot chosen by the farmers is spread more on the north and on the south of the territory. To analyze those results, the easiest way should be to compare these results with land register of Ecuador. Unfortunately, we don't have it, and we don't have any way to obtain it. So we choose a solution to compare deforestation from the simulation to real data. So I oh, sorry. Oops. Okay. So here are the same result as before, but superposed on Google Maps. So we can see that the territory of Sasha on Google Maps is most of this territory is deforested. So we can see by the lighter green that it is here, and except this territory here and this part here, the whole territory is deforested. So unlike our results, but it can be explained because our results simulate the state of deforestation and occupation of soil during the year 2000, and the data of Google Maps are current. So there is a gap of 20 years that could explain these differences. Finally, as of now, subjective data has been added to the model and influence the installation of agents, and we have to analyze those results. So I'm working on computing the deforestation on each plot due to agricultural needs, and to quantify the deforestation. And it will be another possibility to identify and add other criteria to continue the study of this topic. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Clément. Perfectly on time also. So we have Clive Epah, who just joined us. So Clive, are you okay to give your presentation right now? Clive, can you hear me? Or maybe it's my fault. I don't pronounce your name very well, so you can't know it's you I'm talking to. Clive Epah from Cameroon. Can you hear us? Because we can't hear you. And actually, we can't see you either. Okay, so I guess there is some kind of technical problems which prevents him from being able to talk, which is a pity. So what we can do actually is while waiting for him to come back, if you already have questions, I see a question of Pablo, probably to Clément, I guess. So when different people give the estimations of land quality, how do you decide which quality to attribute? So Clément, if you can answer this question.
Yes, yes. To answer it, this is this problem is done when the different results of interview are merged into a global map. So they will have a sort of moyenne. They will yes, they will consider the different attributes and yes, and medium them this.
Okay, so you average the different attributes?
Yes, thank you.
To,
yeah,
to
average.
take the average.
Yes.
It's okay. Okay. All right, Pablo, you want to continue, or is it okay for you? It's okay. Are there any one question from Benoit to Zenith, and perhaps Hugo? How do you integrate the decision of human actors or on human actors? Maybe Benoit, if you want to.
No, it was off.
Off. Okay. How do you integrate the decision of human actors? So maybe Zenith first.
We are planning to integrate that with the regime agent, sir. So that's why we set it as a different agent, so we can add whatever decisions that could there be. So yes, sir.
Okay, and Hugo, do you plan on integrating human decisions or behaviors?
So not in this model particularly, but there was a lot of work beforehand with discussions with local stakeholders on identifying which birds were of interest. Like we weren't, like there's always this idea, like bringing back the best bird, if people like are not into it, is not going to be very efficient. So there was conversations beforehand, and now we're having conversations also to try to identify actual areas on the island to use and to run the model on with them to kind of see what the results are and things like that. So not really in the model because it's purely based on like scientific data, unfortunately, but like in the pre and post process, there is conversations, yeah.
Okay, one more question for Clément. Did you check the time-lapse data from Google Earth?
No, I didn't check that.
Okay, and more precisely, because I don't understand the question. What would it mean, and what would it mean to check this time-lapse data in your model?
The question was from me by saying that I was thinking about the problem because the Google data, he said that the data were actual, but the data from the simulation were from 2000. So maybe with the time-lapse data from Google, he can go in the past in order to check the deforestation, the state of the forests and the crops on the landscape.
Okay.
Okay, I understood. Yes, I ignored it at the moment to do my my presentation, but when I said I will analyze the results, we have the data of deforestation in function of the time lapse of the data of deforestation. Just those data are not really usable for presentation. So I just use the Google Maps version.
Okay. So in the meantime, Clive Epah has rejoined us with another identity. So I hope the microphone is working. Can you hear us, Clive? You're, for the moment, you're muted. So, okay.
Yes, good morning, sir.
Perfect.
I'm sorry,
Perfect.
the GMT, the time was our time plus 2, GMT plus 2, Myriam Grillot time plus 2. Normally, I calculate it. Yes.
Okay, it's okay.
Okay.
That's the difficulty of organizing something across continents.
Okay,
What I propose to you is that you present your work, and you have 10 minutes to do so. and then we proceed on with questions for you and all the other presenters. Is it okay for you?
Yes, it's okay. It's okay, sir.
Okay. So you have the floor, and you can share the screen with your slides as well.
Okay.
Clive, is it okay?
Yes, sir, it's okay. I'm launching the.
All right.
Yes, the PowerPoint.
Okay.
I have to share the PowerPoint. How to share it? I want to share the PowerPoint.
Yeah, so you share the screen.
Share the screen.
Share the screen in the bottom of the Zoom window.
Yes. Where can I share the screen here? At Zoom, eh? I don't see where
So
I can share. Yes?
At the bottom of the Zoom window, you have a little icon called Share Screen. Or, well, it depends on what language you use, but it can
English.
be also partager d'écran. Okay, so what's
Oui,
normally
okay, partager écran. Ok, partager écran. Ok, d'accord, j'ai vu. Partager écran, yeah. Ok.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, sir. Okay.
So you have 10 minutes, huh?
Okay.
All right.
So yes, sir. Okay. Thank you to give me the floor. My intervention will be based on a multi-agent system for spatial modeling of forest dynamic case of the forest savannah in Adamawa, Cameroon. Adamawa is a region in Cameroon. So I just give the brief description, then I will just give a comment. For several years, significant modifications have appeared in many so-called natural forest areas, either because of the emergence of new function in relation of the development of new activity, or as a result of the emergence of a new parties competing with traditional parties. The mastery of these multiple activities leads to emerging forms of earth and concept assistant capable of making forests user aware of the consequence of their action of the resources. They use it to destabilize the environment. This article presents an intelligent solution based on multi-agent system, a particular powerful tools for representing such complex such and for accounting for the different components of the environment, the relationship between social groups and the international interaction between the practice of the actors of the system and the main geographic dynamics. So the model and the spatial dynamic simulation of time of any forest recovery proposed to mobilize computer models of the mutual system type integrating geographic information system to represent the interaction between natural dynamic and social dynamics. It is a question of confronting the actors acting on natural forest area with power dynamic of evolution to their environment. Using the Gama modeling language, the proposed simulation agent is applied to a grove, the starting point for any reforestation located in the town of Ngaoundéré in northern Cameroon. A comparison between two scenarios solution for control forest management, rather the effective or the purpose solution. So the result obtained should a significant forest cover of. So we want to make a prediction to give the reforestation of some area. Okay. The edited description of the forest is like a plant formation conditioned by a number of factors: climate, soil formation, latitude, altitude, nature of the soil, and also the action of humans and animals. Our work now, the evolution of biodiversity territories is the result of complex processes that take place at different spatial temporal scales. By integration social, ecological, and spatial dynamic into a single model must allow mutual system allow us to better understand how the properties of a forest ecosystem has at a given moment may originate from the interaction of the component of the system and a future level. It is then a question of making the model evolve towards a real simulator around which different actors can choose parameters of behavior, and those test how individual or social choice can have replication at an evolution period. We try to present our environment. You have locate an area where things can't not be reached by bushfires because of the forest microclimates that prevail there. Reforestation is done through recruitment species. We have many species, but is there. Pioneer species, which will allow the establishment of forest species. The latter over time will arm the first species and will eventually disappear, leaving room for so-called forest species. We will talk about the regeneration of the forest. So the main problem is to regenerate the forest. We have looked at some species that there is, as geographic people said, there's where the reforestation is going there. Always the reforestation can be start there. So and you can say in some years, in few years, in these years, the reforestation will be able at this period. The environment requires dynamic spatial model of forest cover. So these are the species. These are the species that show how the forest can be recovered for some years. So we must study these species and make a simulation model. So this year, this is the forest, and now we are talking about the deforestation. We will make a model to give the reforestation, to give the new vegetation, and so to come out of the problem of climate. Several works have already been carried out concerning comparison model and forest management. In this work, we are interested in concepts used to achieve the spatial model of forest dynamic involved collectivity identify the main factors. For this following question, we must be taking into account what are the main resources of the forest and essential information to how to ensure a suitable use for the days to come. What are the main indicators that seem able or should play a decisive role in the dynamic management of this forest? What are the main ecological dynamic at play? How are those dynamic affected by these indicators? How does each indicators use the resources it covers? Some of context. So we make some context, geography area, cultivator species, and we can add some concept to study our model and to give the simulation. As we have said, the simulation is the prediction for the reforestation to give a new forest in the locality of Adamawa. Oh, this the point of the agent relationships, agent communication interaction between social dynamic and ecological. So we are trying to give the interaction between some of species of as agent, which will be taken in our model. This is the program how we can make our studies simulation. We start the present of our environment, and after we present the instance of agent, the same time present of the concept and present the relation of agent. Then we continue to present the attribute of concept, the facet attribute. We will make implementation, the implementation with of agent reason rules at the same level, the semantic and syntactic verification. Now, after for the concern the simulation, we make a scenario and we take a scenario and real environment data, make a simulation and give the results. But I've already talked about the Adamawa region is a tropical zone situated between the equatorial zone of the south and the sub-Saharan zone. We allocate an area where grow some of species. So we continue. So our result or outputs, we want to have a model of the system built with active input. The model will next be used in simulation for collective prospecting on management scenario. It is a prediction of scenario, show how the forest will grow in few years. So we want to make a reforestation, not deforestation. We want to combat, we want to bring out the deforestation. How to proceed? How can I proceed? By using the formula, which formula? Markov chain or chain de Markov. What? Because as the prediction, chain Markov, which formula? How to increase development of computing? Because here in Cameroon, even we take a topic in geography or any social science, we need to increase the computing so that because they will say that the topic is geography, the topic is social science, the topic is ecologic, the topic is biologic, but we want to bring out the topic inside the computing so that bring some new things in computing. Okay, thanks for your kind attention. I'm looking for your question. I'm reserved for all the intervention and presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've had 4 presentations from 4 continents almost. So quite interesting to travel the world using Gama. I had one question about your presentation, Clive. Do you have a model implemented, or are you just at the stage where actually you're thinking about how to design your model?
Yeah, thank you, sir. I don't have a model. I want to think about the new model, and that you people should help me to implement the new model and the simulation.
Okay. So are there some questions you would like? We have 2 minutes actually to ask questions to the different speakers. So Hugo, Zenith, Clément, and Clive. So are there any questions you would like to ask them? Knowing that you always have the possibility to do it on Slack. Okay, if you follow the link to the Slack group, then you can ask whatever question you want, even after the session, of course. And also you can contact people directly by mail or anything after. So I don't see any hands raising. I don't see any question in the chat. So we're probably gonna close this first session of the GamaDays. So thanks a lot to the 4 speakers. Okay, it was really fascinating actually to see these different models coming from different points, different locations in the world. And I will now give the floor, I think, to Benoit, who will be the moderator of the second session, if I'm not completely wrong.
Please, I have a question.
Okay. You have a question. Okay.
Yes, please add what you said, but for at the end of the session, can we have all the documents, all the presentations, so that we should keep have a database of Gama first day, Gama 2021 day.
Yeah, we will. What we will do actually is to ask each speaker whether or not he wants to share his slides. And for all of those who say yes, we will compile them and put them, well, make them available somewhere on the web page or whatever site will be possible. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So, but of course, the goal is to share as much as we can the different slides and presentations.
Okay.
Okay. So thanks a lot, you four, and Benoit. I let you the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to complete your answer, the abstract are already shared on the GamaDays website, so you can already download all of the abstract. So, good morning. I'm Benoit Godou, and I will be the moderator for this second session on still on ecology and agriculture. So that time mainly with researchers from France, but still. We will travel all around the world with a case study. If I'm right, the first so we'll have only 3 presentations for this session. The first one will be given by Dominique Trévisan about Opal, a framework for assessing the eco-functionalities of landscapes. Dominique, are you here?
Yes, yes. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, I will share my screen.
So you will have 20 minutes to present your work.
Okay, you have my. Can you see my screen now?
We can see your screen. You could use the diaporama option. So
yes. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
So good morning, everybody. I will speak about Opal. It's a program we have developed during 2 years, 2 to 3 years, about landscape and the interest of landscape in terms of eco-functionality. We were many writers on this work, and I with Patrick Taillandier, Benoît Sarrazin, and Claude Janin. And the next slide. About my introduction about agroecology. Agroecology can have the ambition of define new landscape organization to strengthen the ecosystem function of the landscape. For example, to help in protection of natural resources for water, soil, and habitats. But also to help in a better closing or coping of the nutriment cycle, and also to help on the question of pollution control. So if we consider a landscape, where landscape is characterized by form, by structure, and also by flows, which are in relation with the use and occupation of territories and geographical patterns of the territories. So to understand how landscape can help in terms of agroecology, we need an interdisciplinary approach between human geography and biophysical science. And in terms of with the objective of how can we optimize landscape mosaics, how can we test new organization of landscapes by defining, for example, new production system, new crop interfaces, or to reorganize the crops distribution in the space. The models we have developed to help in this, about this question are summarized in this picture. We have on the left the process which have been under consideration, and on the right the different model we developed in the Opal system. And in the middle, we have different plans which symbolize the thing we have modelized and characterized. The first process is concern the first plan. It concerns the structure and the form of the landscape that are built from decision rules and choices operated in the farming systems. And these processes are modeled in Opal with land use and land cover change model. The second plan corresponds to a process in relation with the pressures and elaboration of nutriment of pollutant stores by agricultural practices. On this schema, for example, we have agricultural practice which are spread on the territories, and they have we have 8 black points which represent 8 important pressures in the landscape, in the territory. And we modeled this pressure by considering agricultural practices and the relation between agricultural practices and the crops and nutrient needs of crops, and also the relation with agricultural practice and erosion susceptibility or the deposit of fecal bacteria by manure spreading, for example. The third plan concerns the weathering of the previous pressures by different components of water flow. And to evaluate processes, we develop 3D water flow models from soil, plant biomass, and digital elevation models. For example, here we have from the 8 initial pressure which have been disposed on the area, we have only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pressure which are well mobilized by water flows. And the last plan concerns the transfer itself of previously mobilized pressure, and the corresponding modeling of what happened during the moving of particles from upslope to down slopes situation, including sink and source effect. So this is all the job is done within Opal, and we have in fact 2 main indicators of the functioning which are calculated in Opal. The first one is the delivery ratio. We see in that example that we have 2 black pressures that are exported at the outside of the landscape from the 8 original initial pressures. So the delivery ratio is 2:8. And also we calculated, we tracked the particle in computational domain, and we calculated the particle, the number of particles who reach the outlet of the territory during the time, and this gives us an important characterization of the landscape, which is the transfer function. So how much the landscape is able to transfer particles during time. This is the transfer function. So these models are coded in different languages. The first language is with Gama, which are the yellow boxes. And we use also MATLAB to manage matrix computation on water flow and on different things. So we share two platforms on this model. On Opal, we share Gama first and also MATLAB. So I can give you some light explanation of what we do, what we've done for these models. First, for land use and land cover change, we considered two computation schemes in Gama language, depending on the objectives of the farming systems. In the case of annual crops, which is the first graph here, we applied the Edmond-Karp's flow algorithm to select the crop rotation that allow farmers to achieve their cropping objectives. In the case of dairy production and cattle production, the things were quite different because we defined, we consider here farmer decision rules, slope and soil contrast, as well as distance between fields and livestock sheds to evaluate how the landscape is organized by farming activities. For the water movement within landscape, we develop a program within MATLAB. And the water of movement within the landscape is evaluated considering several submodels. The first submodel concerns the plant growth. It's a plant growth models and also a root development models. We consider also physical processes controlling several water flow components, such, for example, the overland flow, which is produced by soil crusting or variable source area, or also subsurface flows or vertical flows. And we also considered here exchanges between of water from upslope to downslope area following cascading rules, and this until water reach the river network, from soil to the river networks. And finally, we also considered the river functioning, and especially noticeably the lengthening or the shortening of the river network that's depend on antecedent climatic conditions. For the particle transfer, we considered a number n of particles which were inserted in the landscape depending on practice pressures and which are mobilized by water components, by surface, by subsurface, or input flow transfer. And these particles are during their transfer, during their trajectory to the outlet of the landscape, they are subject to sinks or source effect, for example, by plant assimilation, also retrogradation, or different things which can happen on these poor particles. So particle tracking also is made by counting at the basin outlet and gives the transfer functions I described previously and the delivery ratio. So we made all this stuff in Gama, in the Gama platform. As you can see there, a picture giving the cloud of particle moving to the outlet during the 3 days here. An important thing is also that we can use all these data that are produced by the two models concerning the pressure, concerning the mobilization, or concerning the delivery ratio or the transfer function. If you consider the convolution products between delivery ratio, pressure, and mobilization with a transfer function, we are able to reproduce the observed flow at the outlet of the landscape, considering here a unit factor conversion. So all this data can be confronted to observed data to evaluate the adequacy of the models. So we have done that. And we have done that thanks to a graphical user interface, which can, that the user can launch to make all the program to control all the program within the workflow, and the work itself is transparent because the two languages are connected, coupled together by different flags. So, and it seems to be easy to use these programs, so the user don't have to manage problems of input of output of data, or to introduce controls to perform the models. So here we have an example, for example, on this graphical of the result obtained by Opal, which is a transfer function of particles during 10 days. We have the first day reached a great number of particles who reach the outlet of the landscape, and during the time, the number of particles is decreased regularly, which is characteristic with a characteristic form of it's a power law distribution there. So some results about we obtained with in different we test Opal in 3 different territories, which are very different in terms of slopes, in terms of agricultural conditions, and also in terms of biomass and of agricultural system. So here the first graph gives us the result of the land use and the land use program with the ratio between the calculated area and the expected areas of the farmers. We can see that the ratio is close to 1. That signifies that we have a good agreement between the expected and the real landscape. The second one give us a plot giving confronted observed data to calculate data of water flow. This is water flow given by recorded in the rivers, and the next one concern the observed and calculated data about of suspended matter which have been recorded in one watershed. So in each case, we have quite rather good results with high Nash subscript coefficients, and also low dispersal of residue between the bisectors, as we can see there. The next the next result concern the response of landscape in for a different scenario of use for different change. We can simulate on landscape. Here we have the evaluation from the delivery ratio for different conditions, different hypotheses of change in the systems and the organization of crops and infrastructure that compose the landscapes. So we can evaluate, we can manage, we can ask different things on landscape, and with Opal test this scenario. And this is my last slide with my conclusion. We test, as I said, the effectiveness of Opal procedures in different true life case in terms of agriculture, soil, and hydrologic conditions. We try to imagine an operational tools for managers, and we work to make as possible that with this tool, the data accessibility is okay. We also were to the robustness, in terms of robustness of algorithms, to avoid over parameterization. We have very few parameters to control the different models and to avoid overfitting problems. And we have workup interface limiting input and output data manipulation as much as possible that allow us to fast works for data configuration and to diagnosis. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you very much for the presentation. It was, yes, you are perfectly on time, so thank you. And also, yes, it seems to be a great work, both in terms of application, but also in terms of technical points, coupling to different software like that inside with a graphical user interface. So I think we'll have many questions during the discussion part. So just a reminder, you can ask questions on the Zoom chat, but also on the Slack chat in order to, during the presentation, so the presenter can answer right now, or we will discuss together after the two remaining presentations. So the next one will bring us back to South America with Romain Mejean from Toulouse.
Hello, is it okay for my sound? Yes.
Okay for your sound and your picture.
My picture. Alors.
So Romain will present his work about landscape generation for land use and land cover change agent-based model with the Gama platform.
Is it okay?
Perfect.
For my my diapo, not my notes.
No, we see your diapo. And
okay.
It's perfect. You have 20 minutes.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Romain Mejean. I'm a PhD student in geography at the University of Toulouse in France. I'm working on land use and land cover change modeling, and my study area is the northern Ecuadorian Amazon. Today I'm going to present an attempt to optimize the initialization step of land change agent-based models used for changes prediction. Let's start by giving a few words about land use change modeling. Land use and land cover change has impacts on climate, on soil degradation, on biodiversity. So over the past decades, a large spectrum of models to study land systems through land change have emerged to improve our understanding of land use and land cover changes, to do forecasting. For example, land use change modeling approaches can be classified into 6 main categories, from the most pattern-based to the most process-based. While the former is used more for prediction or forecasting, the latter is used more for understanding the land system in the bibliography. Briefly, pattern-based inductive approaches are models built from the correlation between observed changes between two classifications and assumed drivers of these changes, called explanatory variables, on a calibration period. The aim is to train the model over this calibration period and then to predict by extrapolating historic patterns. The future amount of changes is often estimated from Markov chains, while their future location is estimated by statistical methods or artificial intelligence like artificial neural network, etc. As you know, agent-based models are a process-based approach built from farmers' behaviors. The purpose is to model the behavior of heterogeneous entities at the local scale in order to reproduce changes at the macro scales. Agent-based models can be used in land change studies for policy analysis and planning, for participatory modeling to test social and economic science concepts, etc., but also sometimes for prediction or foresight purpose of changes. Our purpose is to reproduce land change with an agent-based model between two dates, between two land cover maps, a bit like a calibration period. This implies that we need to build an ABM of land use change dynamics with as little abstraction as possible, like a KIDS model, a keep it descriptive model, descriptive approach, but how to build a synthetic land system with synthetic components to test hypotheses about itself and its future, and how to create a realistic agents population and a synthetic land use patchwork for foresight approaches. It's not easy to represent a real world situation at a specific point in time in an agent-based model, and the volume of data required is large and does not always exist. For example, land cover maps often lack the necessary level of detail to build a farm level agent-based model. So we introduce a workflow to initialize descriptive land use change models, agent-based models for predictive purposes based on simple remote sensing data, population census data, cadastral data, and qualitative survey data relative to decision-making processes, the choice of a livelihood strategy, and agricultural practices. The model was developed on the Gama platform with the GenStar plugin for the generation of a synthetic population. We generated a realistic synthetic population and an agricultural landscape consistent with it, with its attributes, the livelihood strategy, the available labor force in the household, etc. In practice, it's more a patchwork of probabilistic agricultural activities in each plot to model later the dynamics. A few words about my field of study now. It's the northern part of the Ecuadorian Amazon in Ecuador, a region that has undergone significant land use change since the discovery of oil fields in the late 60s and its exploitation. Oil companies have built roads, and landless peasants from all over the country have settled in the Amazon. This is deforestation due to smallholder farmers. We studied the territory of Dayuma, a perfect example of frontier dynamics. And here are land cover maps from remote sensing data, which show the land use change and deforestation dynamics in the study area in recent years. In 2000, in 2008, in 2016. We aim to simulate the changes between the two last classification, here in red, between 2008 and 2016, but with only 4 land cover classes, how to build a farm level ABM. This is how we built our initialization step. Firstly, we collected and processed the data. Secondly, we generated a synthetic population with GenStar. Then we assigned a livelihood strategy to each household generated to provide agents heterogeneity. And finally, we generated a patchwork of agricultural activity, a patchwork of land use in each plot, consistent with the generated population's attributes. We had cadastral data in orange plots under community land management by indigenous people, and in green the individual plots, the settlers plot. The question was to generate a realistic population, a realistic agent population, and to locate it in this plot. For this, we used the Ecuadorian National Census, in particular a detailed file where one line is for one person or for one household. Households in the Ecuadorian census are identified according to the census sector to which they belong, but also according to their rural locality, the most detailed entity in the Ecuadorian census. This allows us to extract who are strictly surveyed in the study area, who are the people who live strictly in the survey area for our population generation. And then to generate household from this data in the agent-based model. And at the same time, to specialize them on the plot, we use GenStar with Gama. It's a plugin in Gama dedicated to the generation of synthetic population for agent-based model. GenStar makes it possible to generate agents according to exhaustive information or to a sample, but also makes it possible to locate the agents in polygons by matching the data with the census sectors. So we use it to locate the census agents on the cadastral parcels, the community parcels, and the individual parcels, the plots in green and the comunas in Spanish in orange here. The next step is to assign a livelihood strategy to the household generated. The aim is to typologize the behavior of agents. This will allow us to bring this. This allows to bring the heterogeneity of agents. We have carried out this typology based on interviews and field surveys. Surveys made it possible to characterize the spatial and social distribution of the livelihood strategies. Some are close to the road, some lead to higher rates of deforestation because based on livestock, for example. Others are chosen by indigenous population, etc. So we were able to allocate 5 livelihood strategies. Some are more crop-based, others more livestock-based, etc., to the households using a multi-criteria analysis. Each household chooses a livelihood strategy according to its attributes. For example, what weight agents of strategy 1 give to the criterion proximity to the road, to the criterion ethnicity, etc. And the same for the strategy 2, 3, 4, 5. Plus a percentage of maximization of the Moran index, which is a spatial autocorrelation measure for imitating the neighborhood processes of strategy imitation. For information, I use one of the multi-criteria analysis implemented in Gama, the weighted means. The results is visible on this map, which shows the spatial distribution of the generated households according to their livelihood strategy. It's SP 1.1, SP 1.2, etc. are livelihood strategies. The ellipses summarize the spatial dispersion of each set of points and its directional trend. It's like spatial standard deviation. Finally, we generated an agricultural landscape consistent with the synthetic population. The aim was to augment our binary remote sensing data, forest, non-forest, to generate a patchwork of agricultural activities in each occupied plot, as if we were dressing the deforested pixel according to our survey data and household characteristics. Maybe it's a bit like assigning the land use to each land cover on the map. For this, we asked each household agent to write in a CSV file his own patchwork according to his livelihood strategy and its attributes. The file is then used to generate land use pixel. The UML diagram below shows an example of a workflow for agents who have chosen the livelihood strategy number 1 without details here. First, we begin a loop. As long as an activity has not been assigned to all deforested pixels on the plot, if household needs, it means mouse to feed are less than the food crops pixel, and if there is enough labor force available to affect food crops, write corn and deduct the corresponding labor to the labor force of the household. If not, is there enough labor force to make coffee? If yes, write coffee and deduct the corresponding labor force. It's important to note that the priority is therefore given to food crops according to the logic of first satisfy needs and then do cash crops. If no, write fallow. And it's the same for the 4 other livelihood strategies with more or less complexity, always according to survey data. 4 and 5 is the same for the 4 other LS livelihood strategies. Sorry. Finally, let's move on some results. Here it's an example of a result on part of the study area. It's a zoom to focus on the details. We thus have on the image on the left the classification which I presented to you previously, rather binary, forest, non-forest. And on the right, the agricultural landscape generated for the model at the end of the init step, with a much more complex, patchwork of land use pixels, coffee, cocoa, complex association pastures, etc., generated from qualitative surveys and consistent with the population created from the census here on the map. Here the same thing, but without the zoom, before init workflow and after init workflow, with patchy landscape in each plot. So each household generated therefore as a location consistent with census data, a plot of land, individual or collective, a livelihood strategy based on survey data and allocated through surveys. And each agricultural pixel has become a specific land use according to the livelihood strategy of the households and to their needs and their labor force. Some elements for discussion. We have to need to characterize the uncertainty in the methodology, and we need to consider the empirical validation of the synthetic data generated, particularly the landscape data, but how? Maybe with satellite images. Moreover, we need to calibrate the weight of criteria in the multi-criteria analysis. Why not with the OpenMOL software to explore parameters? After we can check the correlation between proximity to the world and the choice of a particular livelihood strategy. As a perspective, we could imagine initiating a guideline to build a land use change agent-based initialization step for predictive purpose in the land use change modeling. Thank you for your attention, and sorry for my English.
Thank you very much. We were perfectly able to understand you.
Okay.
At least from my side, with my French accent too, but I think everybody too. It was great. Thank you. Just to give some context, the case study of Romain was the same as the one from Clément that presented in the previous session. It was 2 different parishes, so 2 different provinces of Ecuador. And the second point is that the tool Romain using to initialize the population, GenStar, is something that will be presented tomorrow afternoon by Kevin Chapuis. So you can have more detail about this library that is integrated in Gama. So thank you for this presentation that give a new example of use of the GenStar library. In general, it was more used for cities, population in the city, but here it's an original one. So just a reminder for everybody, don't hesitate to ask questions on the chat that we will ask to everybody that has presented in this session just after the next presentation that will be given by Myriam Grillot that will bring us in West Africa, if I'm right, to present our model.
Hello, everybody. I think you can hear me and see my screen.
Everybody's perfect. Thank you.
Good. So our presentation is entitled Multi-Level Nutrient Cycle Model in Agro-sylvo-pastoral Systems of West Africa. So this is a study that took more than 3 years of work. So in 10 minutes, it will be quite short, but you have the publications if you want to, for further details or also exchanges on Slack. So our case study was in the groundnut Senegalese basin. That is the red dot on the map. I'm not sure if you see my mouse, but that is there. So if we start directly into the field and in the groundnut basin, there the livestock mobility is responsible for nutrient transfers from village peripheries that are the rangelands to the places where the livestock sleep during the night. So that is the home fields that are nearby the houses. So there they, during the dry season, they can just graze outside and then go and sleep and excrete and produce fertilization for the home that are nearby the houses, where they want to ensure that they will have the subsistence crops. That is the main priority over there first. So then during the cropping season, that is the rainy season, the livestock cannot stay in the crops. So it goes into the fallows and stay there for the whole season. And then come back to the crops where they can eat residues when the harvest is over. So that is a traditional village that was described since the 20s. Oops, sorry, I'm not on the right there. And then as time went on, the population grew, and also there was a strong adoption of a groundnut crop that led to an extension of bush fields over to rangelands, and also a decrease of fallows. So still the livestock could graze and be mobile over the landscape, but there was less space for them. And nowadays we have villages where there is almost no place for the extensive livestock, because there is no rangeland anymore, and during the and no fallows. So during the cropping season, they can't stay on the village. And also, oops, sorry. Yes, you have it there. There are now livestock that new breeding practices that are developing, that is keeping the livestock within the houses. So they just have them for the whole period of fattening, and the livestock doesn't move. So then it produces manure, and it does then. If we want the fertilization to be spread, we need the human to take the manure and to then spread it. So some researchers alerted that there was a risk of nutrient depletion due to these changes of landscape that was then decreasing the ability to have this mobile livestock, and also these changes that was these new practices of breeding livestock. So our research question was then, how simultaneous evolutions of livestock systems and landscape impact nutrient cycles in the functioning of these agro-sylvo-pastoral systems. That is so in the groundnut basin, but also quite similar in all of the Sahelian zone. So our first objective was to represent this functioning of the system, so with the model, and the second was to simulate this impact of this agrarian transition. And for some reasons of more simplicity, we focused on nitrogen flows. So we built the terroir model, because over there, the villages are called terroir. That was implemented with Gama. And conceptually, we choose to build it around two stock flow models to describe this functioning. So first we have the activities that are, so actually all of our agents that are evolving, and then all of the flows that goes between them. And we have the other conceptual stock flow model that is spatialized, that is all of the flows that goes from one land unit, so that is homestead, home fields, bush fields, and rangelands, to another due to these activities from the agents. And for some reasons, we decided to implement that on a grid that represented the village. So regarding the structure of the terroir model, so the main deciding agent is the household. So we have 4 types of household based on original surveys from this area. So the household can be whether oriented towards livestock or crop, and oriented towards market of subsistence. So they have their herds, their plots and their stock that they manage. And for initialization, we need only to know the share of each type of household and the number of households we have in the landscape, and of course their farming practices. And we need to know also the village area and its share of each land unit, and the annual rainfall. And then the simulation simulates farming activities, biophysical processes that are such as livestock excreta or crop growth. And then we observe the biomass flows, and we use it to do some, to compute some indicators around ecological network analysis, and also farm gate balances, nutrient balances. In the model simulates a year, and we ran it for 5 years and replicated it 8 times due to some randomness in the model. So we only used the 5th year for the result. So the activities are such as livestock grazing and excretion that leads to household exchanges and competition over food for livestock. They happen daily in the model. We also have other activities that are happening weekly, such as household trades. And we have some other activities that happen annually, such as yield computation. We were able to evaluate exhaustive surveys from 2 contrasted villages from the Grand Basin. So on the one hand, we had a traditional village from only with only extensive livestock herds, and on the other hand, we had a fattening village with almost no extensive livestock herd. So we were, I don't want you to read all of this data, but I just want you to show you that we were able to compare observations that are in black and simulation that are in blue at the 3 levels of analysis that we had, that is village, household, and compartment. And the only thing that I want to say there is that the model quite represents well the observations we had, but the diversity of the household and of the compartment is less represented. That you have this there for the granary compartment, for instance. So going back to our agrarian transition, so we set 7 scenarios that changed the landscape structure and household types. So that was decreasing rangelands and increasing the market-oriented livestock farmers. And the main result there was that we had an intensification of nitrogen flows, for sure, but the internal cycling rates kept quite high, over 0.6. And overall, the transition maintained crop livestock integration, And however, there was a decrease of nitrogen balance as alerted by the researchers. So that was at plot level, but we could see an accumulation in the manure heaps due to a lack of workforce to spread the manure. So it was accumulating in the homestead. And we also observed that there was a spatial heterogeneity that was maintained with an accumulation of nitrogen nearby the houses in the home fields due to difficulty to have enough nitrogen to go in the whole landscape. So to conclude, I would say that we have two conceptual stock flow models. So that is exchanges between activities. That is something that is quite easy to to measure, at least with surveys, but we were also to see the exchange between the different spatial land units. That is very much more difficult to have with surveys, so the simulations were very useful for that. We are able with the model to do a multi-level analysis, that is going from the compartment of the farms up to the village. And as outlook, well, this work is over, but I would say that we could use it with other indicators. So that was with nitrogen, but we are thinking about carbon, for instance. And also we can use this model maybe in other areas that are quite similar, or maybe to test other innovating systems, or maybe changing constraints. What happens if maybe there are more people, or we have more workforce to spread the manure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Myriam. So thank you, great presentation. So first, thank you all of you for being on time, perfectly on time, so that's great. I will take, there is a 2 or 3 questions on the chat. No, it was not a hand that was raised, it was a congrats. So don't hesitate to raise your hand if you have a question. There was a question from Goodroom to Romain about do you take into account land degradation with respect to crop type after deforestation?
Yes, I have. There is a land degradation for some crops in terms of there is a number of months after this for some crops. Yes.
Okay, and which it has an effect on the productivity, fertility.
It has an effect on reforestation.
Okay.
So when the pixel is not used, is considered like forest, I think.
Okay, thank you. Goodroom, does it answer your question, or you want to more precision? Okay. There was a question for Patrick for both Dominique and Romain concerning the genericity of the model, and perhaps also for Myriam, we can extend to all of you. In particular on the application of the model. So perhaps Dominique, first, could you introduce the application cases and if it's a genericity?
Yes, for us, it's quite classical data that we need to launch the models. We use in particular the digital elevation models, soil data. So we need maps about the organization of river networks. Urban area also have to be defined in the models. The most difficult things, I think, is to obtain the farm plots to link farmers to their plots to have some data about that. I think it could be difficult because in some certain circumstances these data are private, are not public. So we need to make arrangement to have such data. But but thereafter we have normal data, classical data about meteorological data, about temperature, evapotranspiration, and precipitation. And also, this is could be quite difficult to obtain. It's about river flows, but in some certain circumstances, we can have regular programs which can help in having such data, because we need this observation of water flows at the outlet of basin in order to parameterize the hydrological models in our work. So it's quite classical data to, I think for this point of view, the model could be quite generic.
Just if I can, just in terms of hydrology, could be applied on any water basin, or there is some, I don't know, condition of the slope, or?
We have developed the model in different conditions, which were very different in terms of soil permeability. The hydrological system were very different. So we wanted to test it very different situation in order to better generalize the application of the model.
Okay, thank you. Romain, you answer in the chat. You want to add something?
No. I use cadastral data, full population census, but maybe not, because GenStar allows to use samples, land cover data, and surveys on agricultural practices, but the model is not generic. It's more specific, but it could be generic, but not yet.
At the end of your PhD, perhaps.
Yes.
And Myriam, so you also open the discussion, the conclusion. So you will apply, or you plan to apply, or you hope to apply?
For now, that's not the plan. I'm now working at INRAE, so it's not the plan to apply it in other countries, but I know some other people are building a similar model and will most likely use part of this model, but maybe not the full model.
Okay, perhaps it's not really the genericity, but for the moment you mainly model the cycle of nitrogen, if I'm right. And could you extend to other cycle like carbon, or is it something you could apply quite straightforward, or?
That's something that we thought could be quite straightforward, but actually there are some processes that we need to implement for carbon, for instance. Like for nitrogen, we didn't go deep into the sequestration of nitrogen in the soil, but for carbon, it's very important. So that's other things to integrate in the model. For nitrogen, for instance, we were more thinking about all the leaches and the nitrogen losses, but for carbon, it would be more about long-term and the process that happen in the soil and also with the crops. So that's some models that are quite new to add, and also then we also have to then validate it at some point, but they are working on it. So that's the idea.
Okay, thank you. On the chat, I have another question from Alexis to Dominique, perhaps more technical question. So given your experience in coupling very heterogeneous models, any wishes you would like to express regarding what we could provide in Gama to facilitate the design of such integrated models?
Yes, we have done different things to couple the model Gama and MATLAB, and we tried, but we don't success. So we have success with the headless model, to launch Gama with short commands without launching the platform Gama. So it didn't work for many reasons. I don't know exactly why, but if I have some guess about the development of Gama, it could be interesting to facilitate the headless mode, to have to give us users the possibility to test the different Gama models rapidly without needing launching the platform. Because when a user have to launch Gama models, it's quite if you don't know the language, if you don't know how to organize the graphical user and use the graphical user interface, it could be a little bit difficult to. So if we can automatize the works, the things with headless mode, it could be beneficial for I think for users.
Okay, so you are like in favor of having a Gama model as a black box,
yeah,
that you could give input and take output. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you, just curiosity, do you try, there is a plugin about linking Gama and MATLAB? I don't know if you try it or if it was, perhaps it did not exist when you start your work. Also.
Well, we have not tried this plugin, no, not yet. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Any other question on the chat, or some people want to raise their hand? So during that time, I have a question in particular for Myriam, but perhaps for the other two, it's about a representation of the space for the moment, or I'm not sure it's for the moment, but you have a discrete representation with a grid in kind of stylized style of the village. So is it a choice? Is it a constraint? Did you try with geographical data?
So we had geographical data from plots from the farmers that were surveyed, but actually that was not continuous. And so it was easier for us to have this grids where there was this continuity, and maybe we could do something, but then we need GIS work on that, and also to update all of this evolution of this plots and boundaries. That is not so easy. So that was kind of the easy way due to this not continuity of this shape files we had.
But it was not like a constraint or a limitation for your work to use this grid.
No.
Okay.
And also then, well, it's then it's also easier for us for the generosity of the model in a way. If we have the plots that are very typical and for the landscape, then how do we initialize it? Do we synthesize the population? That I did not know how to do that far back, but I still don't know how to do that. So that's also other questions. Then it was easy. We have something quite simple. This grid, every plot has the same size, and then we just attribute it to everybody, and then if we had this still diversity of plots, then I don't know. That's other questions.
Mm. And have you tried to show your model to people, inhabitants, or stakeholders?
The model, no, but the results, we discussed it. But that's maybe too. Well, we kept at the discussion around the biomass flows because nitrogen, it was too far away. Even if we had also experimentations and fields experimentations on the nitrogen losses that happen actually in the manuhips, that's something that is maybe too abstract to discuss.
Okay.
So yeah, we mostly discussed around the practices and the fact that maybe if we could have less workforce constraints, it could be something, well, this kind of things.
Okay. So perhaps the same question to Romain. about the choice of using pixel and of the data choice or the modeling choice you made in your model. Is it basically perhaps for you it's straightforward to use a pixel, or do you have imagined to use more geographical data?
No, I chose pixels to taking into account neighborhood effects, and because in the pattern-based inductive models there is cellular automatons, and the aim of my thesis is to compare the two approaches. So it was I think the best choice to use pixel.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yes.
Okay, so we are perfectly on time. We have 1 minute. If you have any remark, comments, want to share? No. Okay, perfect. So it is the first break of the day. So I will not take too much time to reduce this break time. So basically we have a break of 10 minutes and we start back at 11 and 5 minutes for a new session related to new Gama feature, user interface, and link to other tools. So I would like to thank you to all the people who present their work and everybody to attend this first session of the morning. Thank you and see you in 10 minutes. I think the Zoom will stay open so we can interact, but that's the time dedicated for break and coffee in particular. See you.
So we are going to start for this new session. Ni, are you ready?
Yes, okay, I'm ready.
So I think you can share your screen.
Okay.
So Ni is going to speak about a new version of Gama based on web. So I think it will be very interesting. So we'll see that.
You see my screen?
Yep, we can see it, but can you put it in full in
Yeah.
diaporama mode?
Okay.
Perfect. So you have 10 minutes.
Okay, maybe 5 minutes, I think. Hello, everybody. I would like to present to you a new feature of Gama. With that feature, you can do the modeling and simulation directly on the browser. So the main objective of this development is to get rid of the Gama platform from the desktop environment to move to the web-based environment. And because we found that the new modeler, they have usually have some difficulty to installing or to begin to start with Gama with some system requirement about the software. So we decide to have them to get rid of that. And also with the feature of Gama Cloud, we can access, we can do the modeling and simulation everywhere on every device or every type of device. For example, on the tablet, on your phone or mobile smartphone. And using the you see that with the Gama web or Gama cloud, you have the same user interface as with the desktop environment. You have the Gama editor. You can type in the code, and also you can launch the simulation directly in the browser and see in the real time the result of the simulation. And for the development, we use regular technology from Eclipse. It's called RAP. And with the support of server based on the Apache Tomcat, it's a regular server for Java application. So if you want to contribute to development, it's very easy to start the development. But there is some weak points about the validation of the models. They must be done on the server side. It means you need to have the internet connection if you want to validate and to see the result of the simulation. Here's the demo version of the Gama web. I will show you briefly next on my laptop. But there is some delay because they depend on the connection speed, the internet connection speed, and also for the current implementation of the Gama web, we need to depend on the simulation at each simulation step. So it has some delay regarding comparing with the desktop environment. We also support the visualization in a 3D environment based on the WebGL technology. So you can do the modeling and simulation in the just like in the desktop environment with the 3D object. And we also have experimental feature that have to collaborate the modelization between modelers. You can see on the screen that we have two modeler working in the time on the real time in one models. We have a demo server online on the Gama platform website, but unfortunately, because of some technical problem, it is down for the moment. I will fix it in 2 or 3 days. So if you are interested in this feature, please keep in touch in the Slack, and you can try the demo on the server. So that's all for presentation of the new feature of the Gama. I would like to have some comment or some suggestion about the development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think you will have a lot of questions after. So we can pass to the presentation of that about dashboard.
Okay.
Except if you want to do a demo, if you can do a demo now, you have time. Just I don't know, or not. Yeah.
I think we can do it later.
Okay. So we can have the presentation of that, and after you will be able to. After we will discuss more about Gama Web during discussion.
Okay.
That, are you here?
Okay, I'm ready. Can you hear me?
Yep. So you can share your screen. Eventually, you can just turn on your camera. It's up to you.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep. You just have to put it in diaporama mode. Okay.
Okay. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay.
See it. You are in the presenter mode, I think. Can you put it in normal mode?
Okay. I start the presentation for me. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is
Đạt.
What?
Đạt, em chuyển lại cái chế độ trình chiếu nó sai rồi. Người ta đang thấy em trình chiếu cái nốt.
Okay. Sorry. Wait for a minute.
Is it okay that, or do you have some issues when? sharing your screen?
Okay, I'm trying.
Otherwise, it does not matter. You can just okay, can try it, but otherwise you can stay.
Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yep.
Okay, it's okay.
Yeah, it will be okay.
Okay. Sorry. Hello, everyone. My name is Darak. I'm from Canton University. Today, I would like to present the research and proposal of on the issue advanced user interface. The dashboard presentation will be shown just a small share of what I experienced using Gama and what I want to do with it. As a Gama user in the last year thesis, I realized there are some experience that need to be enhanced and developed. First is enrich the layout feature, and the second is advanced simulation experiences. The first part, the first question is how we control the layout of the simulation screen. For me, it's hard to imagine what the layout of the simulation look like when looking at the above code. Can you see? The first time I use the layout statement, I copy layout when running simulation. So I don't understand what the number represent. And if I think if the layout is more complicated, the code or the syntax can be longer too. From that, so I want to add a new operator dashboard type to make available some type dashboard layout. The document about type of the type of dashboard I have attached in my summary. It means I provide some sample of the layout that the dashboard usually has. However, this still does not have user visualize the layout before simulation. So the next I suggest creating a statement that can control the position and size of each display. It should be clear and understandable with the face line, position, width, height, something like that. Let's make the user easy to imagine the layout before simulation, and the code will be clear and easy to use. The next presentation is about advanced simulation experiences. I would like to give the user, the Gama user, the ability to create or to build the dashboard in Gama. The detail is a new view mode is set up. It means all the simulation will be displayed in one display. The user can add and remove the pen. The pen is can be understood as sub display. The user can customize layout, position, size of each pen as well as chart type inside each. And the Gama user can interact with the data to create graph. In general, I provide a flexible dashboard creation toolkit for user, a tool that is more interface oriented, that using code to create a dashboard. So everyone, let's watch a small demo video together. The pan can be viewed as a panel. We can add the pan of any size you want. You can depend on the type of the graph inside. You can move the pan as you like. That one is in the process to develop. So I would like to hear from Gama user and what the feature they want the tool to have to enhance the user experiences. So any suggestion the Gama user can email me and send me a message in the Slack. Okay, that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks for the presentation and for the demo. It's, I think, very interesting to be able to, if we are able in the future to build interface like this, will be very, very nice. It's a very good addition to Gama. So we can pass to the last presentation. So from, sorry. So from Colin. So I don't know if you're ready, Colin.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Do you see the slideshow in full screen?
Yeah, yeah, it's perfect.
Okay, so here I go. So good morning, everyone. My name is Colin. I'm a student from the INSA Centre Val de Loire, and I'm currently in an internship inside of the SMAC team of the IRIT. And I'm going to present what I'm currently working on from BPMN to GAML applied to crisis management. So my work is part of the Trévisan project. This project aims at creating tools to help crisis cell members to have overviews of the situation or to help them making decisions. In our case, we are more interested in the decision-making parts with the use of simulations, since simulations and more specifically agent-based models have give great opportunities to test different kinds of responses to a crisis, but they are often complex to develop since there is some background that's needed, and if we have lots of types of responses, it can take lots of time. So we want to ease this process. We noticed that crisis cell stakeholders represent their response plans with diagrams, and more specifically, business process model notation diagrams, so BPMN. You can see here an example, and I'm going to expand on that later. Our goals with this work is to make a link between BPMN, that's great to have a macro view of kind of some response, and Gama that helps to have the micro view of this response applied to a situation. Our objective is to create agent specifications in GAML from the diagrams that have been created by the crisis cell members. And of course, we want to ensure that the simulation that's produced by these diagrams is conforming to the diagram. Let's start with a quick summary of BPMN. This language is used to represent interactions between various roles and actors within a business or an organization. And it provides a high level of abstraction, so it's easy to understand for stakeholders who want a global view of the situation, but also it's also easy to understand for the people who are doing are involved in the work to see with whom they interact and with what tasks they need to do. In BPMN, there are lots of control flow elements. We can model the notion of choice, but also parallelism of tasks and interruption and lots of other elements. And the advantage is that it goes beyond the UML capabilities for the modeling of processes, because in BPMN, you can have a synchronization between agents or communication between actors, sorry, not agents yet. So it's something that's not possible in UML, and that's why it's also used by the crisis cell members. So let's look at an example. So here is a diagram of a response plan in the case of a fire. You can see that there are several swim lanes. Each lane represents one actor within the response. So you have the crisis cell or the firefighters. This is the representation of one process. The process starts by this start event. Then by following the arrows, we can see that there are some gateways. They are similar to the flow charts, but they can convey different information. In this case, this one is the notion of a choice. We can only go on one of the branches. And this one symbolizes the idea of parallelism between tasks. Then we have the tasks that are the final level of detail in BPMN. So that's, in this case, it represents one activity defining a number of teams. It's quite vague, but also it's simple. We can also reference some processes that we have already defined by using sub-processes. In this case, we're referencing the firefighters intervention. That's a complex diagram that we do not want in order to keep the diagram simple. We can attach events to activities to indicate that either the activity will be interrupted by an event, or in this case, that the activity will can send an information that's going to begin another branch. And then we have the end events to represent the end of a branch within the process. This kind of diagram is quite useful for stakeholders because it's great for an overview. It's simple to read, but to get a specification, it's a bit it's not sufficient. We need to extract for each resource role one process that can be applied for an agent's diagrams. So it's the same representation as earlier, but we have divided for each resource role one process. So the crisis cell process is the main process. It's the same as before, but instead of having lanes, we have sub-processes referencing the different diagrams. And then we have the paramedics here, the paramedics part and the law enforcement that are the same as these parts, but as independent processes. And we have here the detail of the firefighters diagram. And as you can see, it's a bit complex. So in the other diagram, it would have it would have reduced the simplicity of the overview. Now that you have our diagrams, what can we do with them? So here's the architecture of our transformer. The entry point is a BPMN file. Then we use ATL, the Atlas Transformation Language, to turn this model into a BPMN for Gama model. BPMN for Gama is a meta model that we have been working on to act as an intermediary between the BPMN and the GAML code. And then from this model, we use Axeleo to create GAML code, and that's the code that's going to be used for the simulation. This is all developed under Eclipse and is intended to be open source. Now, why did we use a meta model between BPMN and GAML? The first and most important part of this meta model is that we added concepts that are specific to agent-based simulations because BPMN is not meant for the creation of agents code. The advantage also with this meta model is that since it's an intermediary, we can take any BPMN file as an input to our transformation, so we remain compatible with the BPMN norm. Another reason behind this meta model is that we only needed a subset of BPMN because this meta model, BPMN, is very complex and has lots of elements, and they are not all adequate to use for simulations. And it also corresponds to the way we have been developing this transformation. We have been working in an incremental way by adding the elements we needed when we needed them. So here is why we use this meta model. Now, we need to transform this. From this model, we need to create GAML code. So here is a simple diagram, a BPMN diagram. And I'm going to explain some elements and how we map them, what's a concept in in GAML corresponds to the element. So first, we have the resource world that represents one kind of actor within the organization. So in our case, we thought that a resource world would be an agent and a species, more specifically. Then we have the process in its entirety. Since a process is something that an agent or an actor can do one or more times, and that can be reused, we thought that the notion of a reflex would be a great notion to represent this concept. Then we have the tasks. Tasks are we cannot go into more detail with tasks. So we thought that actions could fill this purpose, since tasks are also meant to be reused in several contexts. And we also have the events. In this case, it's an event that's sending a message to another agent. So in this case, we could use the messaging skill from Gama that's already built in, and just send a message as it would be used in another context. Now, what does an agent do in our model? When an agent is created, it starts in an idle state. It has no active process and does nothing. The only thing it does is it checks for its environment to see if there are conditions to start some kind of process. For instance, if you have a paramedic, if the paramedic sees someone that's injured, it will start the process to go save someone. Once the process is started, the agent will keep on doing this process until it's over and go back to the idle state before looking at its environment for another process. The important idea is that an agent can only have one process active at a time. During the process, what the agent does is that it has a list of tasks to execute, and at each cycle, the agent calls the action that's corresponding to the task. The action will return a Boolean indicating whether the activity has been completed or not, because some activities are not cannot be completed in a single cycle. For instance, if it's a movement activity and the cycle is a few seconds, you cannot go from A to B in a few seconds. So that's how we implemented it. And once the task is over, it's removed from the list, and the agent looks at the next element in the diagram to see which tasks need to be added. So if it's a task that's followed by another task, it's simple, but we have some complex cases that I will expand on later. And when the list of tasks is empty, we consider that every branch in the process has been completed, and so the process is over. Now, how does an agent know which tasks to use to add to the list of tasks? Well, in BPMN, there are some gateways that are used to control the flow of the process. In our case, this is a parallel gateway. In BPMN, this kind of gateway indicates that each branch after the gateway needs to be started. So it means that both B and C need to be done. So in this case, we add B and C to the list. It's quite straightforward. Then we need to synchronize on this gateway to ensure that we do not start to go on the next part of the process before B and C are finished. Then we have the exclusive gateways, which are here to introduce the notion of choice or of a decision. So we have a condition that's attached to this gateway, and according to the results, either B or C are added to the list, and then we go on to the next part. There are events that are used to model the sending of information towards other actors or the same actors. We have two kinds of events. We have the throw events, and which are sending the information, and catch events, which are receiving it. Throw events behave quite similarly to the tasks. They are added to the list, but instead of having an action, we only have a few lines of code to indicate the kind of information that's sent. So in this case, we have a message event. So as I said earlier, it's using the messaging skill from GAML. And in this case, it's a signal event. It's only simple information. In this case, it's a flag that's set to true. Then on the receiving end, within the process, at each cycle, the agent will check for the conditions that are needed. So in this case, they are checking for the presence of a message in the mailbox or the value of the flag. And then a new branch is started by adding the task to the list with the same process as before. In BPMN, there are several kinds of events events. In this case, we only transform two types, but there are lots of other events that can be transformed. Then we have the case of sub-processes when we want to reference a process that's already defined in another context. So in this case, what we want to do is to ask another agent to start the process. So that's the first situation. When we are starting, for instance, if the crisis cell is asking one of the firefighters to start an intervention, it's quite straightforward. It's the agent only has to find an agent that has no active process and to tell it to start the relevant process and wait until the process has been completed. Now there's another case when we are referencing a sub-process that's from the same agent. Since an agent can only have one process active at a time, we need to instantiate a sub-agent that's only purpose is to execute the process and then inform the calling agent of the completion of the process, and then it's killed by the simulation. Once the sub-process is over, the agent goes on to the next part of the process as it did before. So here is the different elements that are taken into account in our mapping. And now the question is, what's actually produced by our mapping? The result of the transformation is a code skeleton, a specification of an agent that has to be completed by the modeler. But there is a lot less work than if the modeler started from scratch. For instance, in our transformation, the only thing the modeler has to complete is the actions, the code of the actions, and the conditions in the case of gateways or the sending of messages. And the important parts of the agent, internal logic of the actions and how they behave according to each other is not to be taken into account by the modeler. It's in the specification. So the modeler can focus on the interactions between the agent and its environment or the interactions between several agents. And now that you have a specification, we need to be sure that what the simulation that's executed after is coherent with the diagram that we used as a source. So we need to validate our model that's created. To validate the model, we log at each, once an activity is completed by the agent, we log this activity into a file. This file can then be used after the simulation is complete to extract some traces of execution to know, for instance, if the task A, B, and C have been done in a particular order. These traces are then compared to the diagram to see if the execution is coherent and complying to the model. And as an additional point, we designed these logs to be compatible with the PROM, process mining framework, if someone wants to do a more in-depth analysis of the logs. The preliminary results of this transformation are quite satisfactory. In the case of validation, I ran a simple example simulation on quite a lot of cycles. And every completed trace that I have found in the log was conforming to the model. There was no counterexample indicating that the simulation didn't behave as predicted. So it's not an actual proof, but it's encouraging for the rest of the work. I haven't had the time to apply this transformation in the case of an actual simulation, but with another intern that's working in the Zenith project, we've created an agent for his flood response simulation that was a boat, someone that rescues people on a boat. And from what he's told me, this helped him in the modeling process of his simulation. As a conclusion, we showed that BPMN and Gama can be linked, and with this link, we can create some code to specify an agent. This code is useful for the modeler since they only need to focus on the actions of the agent and not the internal logic between these actions. And the results for now show that our transformation is conforming to the diagrams, so it's quite encouraging. In the future, what we would like to do would be to automate the validation of the simulation by taking the diagram and the log file and then combining them to ensure that it's coherent. And another opportunity would be to add our tool to Gama, because we have been developing this under Eclipse. So we could integrate a BPMN modeler and our transformer so that a modeler could make a diagram in the Gama platform and then transform this diagram into a specification for their agent. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, you can ask them.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very clear and interesting. So if you have questions, you can ask them on the chat. For that, we can just go back for the presentation on Gama Web, as we had many questions about it, but that was already answered a bit by me. So just a question about Gama Web. In terms of delay of time for having a first usable version for everybody. Do you have an idea when you will have a final or first version of Gama Web? And another question is, what is the strategy regarding the Gama Web? The idea is to have one server where we will put Gama Web and everybody will be able to use it, or to let everybody install Gama Web on its own server and use it? So
for me, the final version is depend on the second question of you, Patrick. Depend on what strategy we decide for the Gama Web. But as now, the user interface on the web is working well. The rest is only for the computation of the models is not very good comparing with the desktop environment. So if someone want to use the Gama Web on the browser only for local, that means only for on their own machine, it will work very well. Like there is no much delay comparing with the desktop environment. But for everybody on the world, over the world, I did not find a strategy for resolve that for every user. Maybe we can mimic the technology of OpenMon or YouTube Action or Travis, something like that. We can let the modeler have their own Gama Web on their own cloud accounts if they have their own server on some cloud technology on the web.
Okay, and just last question. I have a question about it. I can check if there's another question. Yeah, just one last question about Gama Web. Do you think it's possible to have just a way to put models online for users to be able to play with the model? I think about that because there was a question about the web, and it's very useful just to test a model without having to edit the model, just to be able to play with it for pedagogical.
Okay. Yes, we can already do it, but unfortunately, like I said, the server is down for the moment. I will send you a link for that feature. We can click on any models in the library, and it can launch on the demo server of Gama.
Okay, great. You can put it on the Slack. I think it can be useful for many people.
Yeah,
Thank you.
but again, it's only for the demonstration or for teaching purpose. It's not for the real model computation.
Yeah, okay. And just so a question more for that in terms of because we saw sorry small issue up sorry. Oops, sorry. Yeah, it's the run of the course. Just a question for that, because the demonstration that you show was very impressive, but for me it looked like a bit NetLogo. From your point of view, what will be different to what can be done with NetLogo? What we can do better with your dashboard than NetLogo and so on? I don't know if you know NetLogo, but or maybe it's a question for me or for Alexis.
Maybe a question for me because I think that they didn't know NetLogo. For the let's say the advanced user interface or the dynamic simulation, I think with the different with NetLogo is we can however, adding some new display or some new chat when in the runtime when the simulation is running.
Okay, so during the simulation running, you can add new elements, but in NetLogo you can do that a bit. But
okay. Wow.
But and in terms of because in NetLogo, so you can add sliders, you can add things like that in the interface, and you can add buttons as well. Do you plan to be able to add some interacting tools
yes,
inside the dashboard?
Yes, we are planning to add in the button and tool.
Okay, thank you very much. So a question.
Can I just add something on this? Actually, what that was presenting is the very first steps of something we are going to do during several months, probably, is to try out and experiment a number of dynamic compositions of displays and layers and user interfaces, widgets. So the goal is really to find out the best technologies we can find. So maybe based on OpenGL or JavaScript or Java or whatever technology is available. So that at some point we can provide this to the users and actually have them directly composing their displays online, even during the execution simulation of a model. Okay, so that's very, very, very first steps that presented today.
Okay, nice. And it will be included inside the new version of Gama, or do you have plans for it, or it will be a plugin? So
it will be probably a plugin, and so as to remain compatible with all the previous versions. So basically, probably a screen where you compose your interface, and it will produce directly the GAML code corresponding to the different displays and things you did, so that you can use it also without using the plugin. Okay, so it's more compositing. Actually, that will go very nicely with a graphical user interface for writing models. Something like Gammagram or.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so there is a question from Roy. So before going to the question for Colin. Can we imagine using Gamma Web in order to do participatory workshop? So several users on the same simulation.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah, it can
participatory,
be. It can be used. Let's say that we will have one strong machine that's installed the Gama web, and everybody will connect into that. It will play as a server, a local server, and it can be used in a artist with.
So with a player, we're playing on its own interface and playing together. It's a multiplayer game or something like that.
Yeah, we can connect to the server through the web browser.
Okay, nice. Just for Colin, so it's a question from Golon. Have you talked of using UML activity diagram instead of BPMN notations? So it's a question for you.
So in this case, we chose to use BPMN, the BPMN notation, because it's the one that's widely in use within the crisis cells in France. So we haven't looked at the activity diagram, UML activity diagrams, because it's more. Our goal was more to help to work with crisis cells. So since they do not use this kind of diagrams, we haven't looked at it.
And is it an international standard or BPMN, or is it something very local, like a French standard?
BPMN is an international standard. It's something from the OMG group. It's the object management group. I'm not sure of the acronym, but it's an international standard that's used, that's widely used, and that's very, very complete. There are lots of work. There's lots of work on this notation.
Okay, and do you, because so you tell us that it's a standard that's used by people working on crisis management, but did you try to work with them, so to present them your tools to see how they'll be able to use it?
Not yet. This is not something I have been working on during this internship, and perhaps it's some way somewhere I can go with my work.
And the question from Benoit. So to continue, can we imagine a graphical plugins integrating in Gama to draw BPMN graph and generate the code? A bit like the graphical modeling plugin that was integrated inside Gama, but using another, so graphical plugins of Gama for the moment is very linked to the meta model of Gama, so it's very close to it. So
yes, since we've been using the Eclipse-based BPMN modeler, so we could integrate this modeler into Gama and then make a link with the transformer in order to create the code. And we would need to create an editor for our meta model to add the information that's not in the BPMN diagrams, but I think it would be possible.
And just for the moment, you are working so with existing BPMN model, or you are just working on a very simple one just to test the process, or do you try to get some real model from people working on crisis?
For now, I've only been working on test diagrams. I've not looked at diagrams from crisis cells. But we have during the internship, the diagrams we've been using to think about what elements we would need and what kind of simulation it would create were based on examples of concrete cases, more specifically a fire and the necessity of intervention of various services from like firefighters or paramedics. So we don't have any current simulation for this, but this is a subject that has been at the center of the work we've been doing.
Because there is another project that will be presented on Friday concerning crisis management. There's Escape project. So I don't know if you know this project or not. And I work a lot on the prevention plan and how to integrate them inside Gama. So for me, I have so many links. So I saw like Clément is connected. But if you are here on Friday morning, I think it can be very interesting to discuss with them because there's many links I think to do with them. Okay, yes, it seems interesting. I don't know if there is other questions or not, because we can stop here. But we can stop 3 minutes before the time. One last question or not about this presentation? No. So maybe we can stop here, and so we can come back at 1 p.m. for the keynote of Alexis. I think it will be very interesting. I don't know, Alexis, if you want to say something before lunch about that.
Yes, why not? Yeah, so I hope you will have the patience to stay and listen to these keynotes. Basically, I'm gonna go browse a little bit through the history of Gama, which is not so young actually. It's 14 years old, and also take this opportunity to open a number of possible discussions with everyone about what the future of a platform like Gama should be, and maybe what kind of focus we should have if we want to continue this great community shaping we have had the last 14 years. Okay, so see you in exactly 1 hour.
And you can continue the discussion on Slack if you want. You can ask during lunch question in the Slack. So thank you very much for your patience and your attention this morning, and see you after the lunch.